know what it is, man. Today we got very special guests live here today, HipHopGems TV, man. We got, I don't even want to come short of your intro, brother, honestly. But I'm gonna keep it as brief and as peace as possible. We got the good brother, Sunez Allah.
Peace.
Peace, how you, brother?
Everything is peace, man.
I mean, I don't even know where to start, man. We got 5%er, we got Skillastrator low, we got teaching his own books. I don't even know where to even begin with you, man. Honestly, man, the work has been phenomenal.
Oh man, thank you. You know what I mean? Just do everything. You know what I mean? I'll say this though, like you see people see me do all these different things. I have a great father, but I also have had a lot of great father figures. You know what I mean? So if I teach in a law school of Mecca, the nation of gods and earths, right? I had elders like my enlightened knowledge, me, Allah, that spent nights teaching me. You know, they wait till I can't open my eyes anymore. Like they'll stay with me that long teaching me. You know what I mean? When I learned martial arts, I learned with the Black Seed. You know, Seagung Bobby Whitaker, and you know he didn't charge me a penny. You know, he told me work hard. He ain't gotta tell me nothing else. You know what I mean? And in this hip hop stuff, man, that's all I could really do really well was write. And by the time it reaches like the last 10, 15 years, people don't really understand to write the way I write. You have to fight your way in there. You know, because I'm in the field of people that deserve to get beat up. You know what I'm saying?
Got you. They
don't cover the music right. They don't know the music right. So everything is a fight to make sure, like, yo, you're not gonna do that.
Right.
I'm gonna cover this thing right. I'm gonna share the best that the music has. You know what I mean? So it's just been a life of learning, man. A life of learning everything, and everything I've learned has been in the style that I've learned music. You know what I mean? The way I've engaged music, to study what it's about, to study who does it, how it's done. It all comes from that life I lived. You know what I mean? Like I said, I lived a different life. So everything that I step into, I kind of step in there as an anomaly. You know, so I'm from Sunset Park, Brooklyn, but that ain't the neighborhood that people talk about in Medina. The God's Call, they talk about the heart of Medina.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? The heart of Medina.
Brownsville.
You know, Brownsville, East New York, Bed-Stuy, you know what I mean? And, you know, the parliaments at Fort Greene in the summer, you know what I mean?
Yep.
That ain't where I'm from. You know what I'm saying? And so even when I started writing, I used to call where I'm from the lettered lung. You know what I'm saying? It don't have much air in it, but it got letters in there. You know what I'm saying?
The book.
One
of the pictures on the book.
right. The lettered lung. And that's why my man PQ, that he drew a lung there. He's wild for that.
PQ, man. Yep.
Who puts a lung on the cover? You know what I mean? But the thing was is that to be good at everything, I had to leave the neighborhood. I had to go somewhere else. Okay. You know what I mean? And I didn't get any kind of fame or any kind of recognition because I was doing crime or anything like that. Nothing. I just knew about where I was getting into. You know what I'm saying? I knew what I was getting into. And as a young man, I learned all these things at the same time I was doing hip hop. You know what I mean? So once I turned, like 18, everything that I learned from my father, who was streetwise, I took it with me and I went everywhere I needed to go. You know what I mean? Because back then in the 90s, though, you had to get your own story. You know, people think it's now like you do a Zoom and shit, or in the 2000s where you go into a fancy label and you sit down and there's a conveyor belt of magazines that get to interview, I don't know, the Fat Joes, the Nellies, never me, right? But that's not how it was, though. You know, I would have to go to the other neighborhoods and get the story. You know, so I would have to go to neighborhoods where I got to remember my way back to this train station just in case, you know what I mean? Right. Or in Pelon, the Bronx and shit, where you can't even run away, man, because those stairs will brutalize your ankles, though. You know what I mean? Them stairs. How many times, like 176 series, you get off on 176 on the Culture train, the 4 train, How you gonna run away? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
The stairs are all discombobulated and shit. You just gotta stay in a fight. Fuck it, right? But so you know, all those years trying to write what I wanted to write, all those difficulties, it just shaped me. I just tried to do the knowledge as best I can. So I grew up in a household that was trying to assimilate us Puerto Ricans, and I rejected all that. You know what I'm saying? I rejected all that. So by the time I'm like 20, 23, I'm trying everything I'm not supposed to. I'm doing hip hop. I'm writing. I'm being a vegan. Like, I'm doing everything that doesn't even make sense. Like, I did shit that my family didn't even know what the word meant.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
How was that for your family though? For when they started to see you was kind of like making a transition, so to speak.
I think that I think I could say that I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So if you ever read the Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, though, right? It tells you that, it basically tells you he has horse blinders. So no matter how many targets are out there, he focuses on one. I don't give a shit what my family thought. I'll keep it real. When I was 20, I didn't care what they thought. I said I didn't go out there to sell anything. So I listened to my parents, and I saw the domino effect that if I sold drugs, right, which in my own ego I thought I was rough enough to do, that if I sold drugs, then it would hurt this person, hurt that family. So I truly believed that was a negative thing to do. So I was willing to be poor. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was willing to be poor and wait my time till I could do what I want to do. But once I found what I thought was righteous enough to do, man, I went and got it. Wow. The knowledge of self was not in Sunset Park. There was no 5% of walking through Sunset Park going, yo, you know that you're the true and living God. Use your understanding seed. I was none of that. I had to go get it. I had to go in Harlem and go get it. But because I was assimilated, I was used to that, because I didn't even know, like, my Boricua culture, like salsa. I didn't know who Pedro Bizu Campos was, the great revolutionary. I didn't know that until I went to college, right? And I met a professor who became my mentor, who had, like, was a Puerto Rican with a PhD and 7 masters, who I still know, talk to and get advice this day, Dr. David Traverso. And those things led me to say, look, I got a lot of catching up to do. And that's why you see a fury in the work I put out. I'm always catching up. You know what I mean? Because they continue daily. You know what I mean? So that fury all just kind of exploded. So, like, before I went to the west side of Harlem to get the knowledge, I was already going to the east side of Harlem to talk to OGs. While I'm doing hip hop, while I'm in magazines, I'm going to OGs on my own time to ask them, yo, what was it like playing with Lavo, man? What was it like playing, you know, oh shit, you played drums on this? And they were like, yeah, you know that, young man? And I would be asking questions and going there. And then, of course, you know, I'd buy a record. By the time I had so many hookups in all these neighborhoods I was in, we'd just be cracking records open, listening to them and everything like that. Wow. So then now I'm getting, like, a knowledge of all these different genres of music that go along. You know what I mean? Late 90s, I was doing hip-hop magazines, but I was dressed like a sonero. You know what I mean? Button shirt. It doesn't have 4 buttons. 4 buttons are always missing on the top. You know what I mean? Like, it don't even have the button. Let's just rip it off, right? Because we ain't putting it up, right? And that's how it was, you know? Before Jay-Z, you know that button-up shit? I was like, man, shit, we was doing that shit already. But I was always on a different path, you know? And so it just kept going. And what you see today is just the culmination of all that, you know?
How was your time at, during, like, the double XLs, the vibes, the source? How would you describe that time?
I would say
you was already
this.
coming in, how you was...
I would say this, to be honest, though, a lot of the people that make 6-figure salaries today, those are the people I came up with.
Okay.
I made different choices. You know, let's be clear. I made different choices, though. You know what I mean? And when they had thoughts about, like, this sounds okay, I was the guy in the De La Soul skit saying, man, that's trash. You know what I mean? I was that guy. You know what I mean? And I was the guy burning bridges saying, nah, come on, you can't like that. How do you like this if you like that? You know? So, like, I'll give you an example. I was burning, Double XL was founded on Reasonable Doubt. Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt. That's a fact. That was the record that they say inspired them, and they called it grown man music, though. So at the time where people thought Stakes is High was grown man music, they were piggybacking on that. And I say piggy on purpose, you know what I mean? Because they were swine backing on that and stealing that and saying that it was Jay-Z that was grown man music.
Wow.
Let me tell you how I would burn bridges, because people probably disagree with this now. I was saying, why is their lead single, though, jacking EPMD? I'd be in the magazine saying that. This is a good question to ask.
Wow.
Because if we write a review, should we ask that?
Right.
Because they didn't do that back then. In 2022, they do it all the time. But in 1996, you didn't do that, right? If you listen to Reasonable Doubt, I was like, this is a poor man's Cuban Links. Wow. This is how harsh I was. I'm just telling you how rugged I was, because it still is shocking to people today. And I was like, and they were like, oh, what you saying and shit like that. Because mind you, in the magazines, there were no Puerto Ricans, so. There were certain people that knew the culture and knew that they were there from the beginning, that we were doing all of the culture, but not getting put on as music. I was the first one to ask people. I was the first one to ever ask Fat Joe, when you at these labels, though, they didn't want you to do hip-hop, right? It was, yeah, and you're the only one to ask me.
Wow. So
people don't know that Fat Joe was asked to be a freestyle singer. Can you imagine that? Fat Joe doing freestyle and dancing and shit?
I cannot.
But if you were light enough if you were too light as a Puerto Rican, then you couldn't do hip hop. You could ask people all the way that were underground, whether they were Q Unique or the Arsonist, or people that was big as Fat Joe. So when he used to say things like, it's a different story. When he used to say things like, we had the muscle, big pun into the labels, that's the different meaning than somebody else saying, you know, we brought our demo tape and made them listen. It's different. And people don't know what that means. You know what I mean? They didn't, we weren't getting in there. So I was always a lone force. Like, I was saying crazy shit to people back then, but it was right. In 1994, I was telling people, I was like, I'll be at Beach Street. Remember Beach Street?
Hell yeah. Downtown.
I'd be outside Beach Street, people be talking about Biggie and everything. I was like, yo, Biggie, he could rhyme though, but he really disappointed me with the Juicy. So what are you talking about? This is a big record. I said, nah, but the way they sampled Juicy, like, it's just, they popped it out. They didn't do nothing to it. Wow. And Isley Brothers, you know, Isley Brothers, that song has its own instrumental. You don't even have to sample it. You just use the instrumental.
Right.
If you're writing about music, like you're writing about it, that shit was not done back then. It's not that it was whack. It's that it wasn't done back then. So in the magazines, I was like, listen, if you think Large Professor, if you think this is dope and all that, then how could you not have that standard and at least throw a question there? Throw a question and say that the truth is that their charisma is overriding the things that they're doing. And you can't use the West Coast excuse. Right. The West Coast culture didn't have the ethos we had. So they didn't think about sampling the Spinners as like too easy. It's different. It's not the same. They didn't think about it when they put hand clap snares on every damn beat. That wasn't what they were going for. Because we didn't have that ear to know that hand clap snares were on every single funk record that they were sampling, because it really was. I was just obsessed because they were only Bar-Kays and all that shit. Like, everything has hand clap snares. But these kind of questions got me thrown out as a writer. Or I would get like really like, they tried to put me down in the most underground stuff. Give me 200 words or some shit like that. So I couldn't perfect what I was wanting to do. Okay. By 1995, 96, I'm in Double XL. And then Vibe, then into Double XL, late 90s. And I'm trying, by the late 90s, I'm trying to write something different. Okay. I'm trying to write and say, do like Bones Malone. Okay. And this is important to my low life story, too. So, like, Bones Malone was the superstar. He wrote columns that were creative. And I told Bones, I only read 2 of them because I didn't want to bite. Safest way to not bite is never read it. Okay. Right? That's why I never read it. But I was reading Amiri Baraka, like I told you off air. And I was listening to Amiri Baraka, and I was like, yo, Amiri Baraka writes about everything, but he's embedded as one because he writes creatively. So I got to do that in hip-hop. So when Bones Malone wrote these creative columns, the Sticks and Stones column in Vibe, I'm going to write these regular reviews, but I'm going to flip the technique. In other words, when you read it, you go, that's Sunez's piece, right? And then you read the byline, like, oh, yeah, that's him. Wow. You know what I mean? Yeah. Something flip, clever, all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? And I would have concepts or shit like that and flip it. They didn't let me do it. And I was doing it all over the college newspaper I was in, because that's how I was found. I was found writing in the college newspaper in CUNY's Baruch College. That's how I got into Vibe. And then those guys left to Double XL. But I never got into being an editor because I wouldn't leave college. I wanted to finish. Because my old earth, my mother, Remembered Imperfection, she would never have it, though. And I got to do something for her. I had to do something. But when I went to all those magazines, they wouldn't let me write it. So I was stuck kind of like having everything go through the conveyor belt and being made to sound the same. You notice how everything sounds the same, especially when you read the reviews? Right. There's a reason for that. It's because people can't write, and it's easy to make it sound all the same. You know what I mean? And plus, they change a lot of crucial stuff. Like, I remember one review I did for Mountain Brothers, though, right? And there was an Asian group out of Philly. So I was like, yo, this is a big deal. They're not the greatest group. They're a very good group. But I want to write it right. That way, if other Asians look at it, they'll be like, yo, I could do this too. Man, when I read the review, it said, oh, they want to be like Tribe Called Quest. I never do that. I never compare, and I never would write somebody's wannabe. Right. But I had already made a connection with them, and they saw what I wrote when I sent it to them, so they knew that it was altered. But I was like, this is why writers get beat up. You know what I mean? But my time in them was not a creative time. The creative part was going out there and meeting the people. Most of the great stuff I learned from these artists, I couldn't even get into the print. You know what I mean? And so I learned to keep it for myself. As the 2000s came in, you could do your own stuff, kinda. Right. Try to publish your own magazine and things like that. Then I did that. So I tried to do my own magazines, but it took a lot of money. And then once you made it, I didn't have any money to distribute it or to market it. Right. You know what I mean? So it was very difficult. You know what I mean?
I want to kind of fast forward a bit because I want to talk about, I mean, you said a lot, brother.
No, space.
I definitely want to get into the term the invisible renaissance.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because it seemed like that was something that like was being coined back then that you didn't have like the term just yet, but it was like on the cusp.
I'm gonna keep it real. Nobody was calling this era shit. You know what I mean? I don't want to hear shit. I don't want to hear about nobody. I don't care if they put your record on the air, if whether they Rosenberg or they're anybody. Nobody was covering this shit the way I was. You know what I mean? When you saw events in the 2010s, though, and Rosenberg was getting respect, which he deserves for being Hot 87.
I remember.
He was getting the scraps that I saw. What I mean by scraps is I was seeing everything, and he was getting the tip of the iceberg that falls on his lap. Where a brother is so good, and he just falls into the commercial sphere. You know what I mean? You know, like 2 days ago, they find Rome Streets.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
2 days ago. So, and I'm listening. I found them years ago. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I could feel some kind of way because I got I got all the pages. I got the receipts. My receipts are pages, hundreds of pages. So when I started to write again in the 2010s because of Kevlar 7, the brother of Bronze Nazareth. Right? Remembered Imperfection. That was my brother. You know what I mean? I love those brothers. You know what I mean? That whole crew, Wiseman. And when they came out with their albums, they just inspired me. Bronze Nazareth inspired me with his lyricism and the ruggedness, you know what I mean? Something I wanted Wu-Tang to have, something I wanted, like, you know? And I had written about Bronze early in The Source and in the small piece that they let me have. And that meant a lot to them, so we connected. When they let me write, it was because Kevlar 7 and my man Paragon, they were designing PremierHipHop.com, and I started to write with Free Abandon.
Wow.
And in 2012, I started to write, and there was a Spit Gems Fuck the Radio album release party. And I was at Spit Gems show, and in that show, I saw all of Broken Home, the whole clique, FU, A1, all of them dudes, right? I'm looking over here, and CF is there, Constant Flow, right? Everybody's there. AG the Coroner was doing his New York song, and that was an anthem. And then Nems was up there, you know, fuck your life, you know what I mean? You're fucking Gunther, you know what I mean? That was when, like, my favorite slang of his was Gunther. Before even Bing Bong, he was doing Gunther, you know? You fucking Gunther, you know? And I was like, and then I'm listening to, like, Rock Marcy. I'm building with Ka. At that time, people talk about Brownsville Ka. There's no interviews with him except the ones that I have. I have the most interviews with him in the beginning, you know? And I'm like, the detail of what's going on. So I'm like, yo, this is like a renaissance. And that word, I get to own it But that word was in my head because of one of my favorite MCs, one of the great MCs of the 2000s to me was Hellraiser.
Hellraiser.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And Hellraiser's always in my head because it broke my heart because we were supposed to do a real in-depth interview. We had talked a lot.
Wow.
And we had to do that, like that super, super interview. And then he got the brain aneurysm. You know what I mean? But man, that shit he was doing with Thug Angels, with Shabazz the Disciple, oh my goodness. Hellraiser was amazing. And he had the album Renaissance Child. So I was like, yo, this is like a renaissance I'm seeing. But I'm the only one that's going to be here to write it. And my ego. So I'm the only one that's going to write it good. Wow. So after I'm there talking with Napoleon, the legend. And I'm like, Sean Price, all that, right? And Napoleon's telling me his plans, which, by the way, he fulfilled to the 10th degree. And I'm telling him what I'm doing. Nah, I just want at the end of the decade, people know I'm the fucking illest. That when you go, there's a writer, though. Everybody else is all right. They're all right. You know what I mean? But Sunez is the one. That was it. That was the goal. Because, you know, and because I wasn't thinking of podcasts. That wasn't really a thing until Combat Jack came. Yep. I wasn't thinking about radio because I had done radio. And I was like, yo, I don't have a place to do radio. So it was just about the pen. And I started to write feverishly then. You know what I'm saying? Feverishly then. And I released the ebook of all that stuff called the Sunez Crates. And I was writing crazy. And then I was like, I'm the only one that's going to see this. It's going to be an invisible renaissance. That you won't see it unless they tell you it's there. Because I said about bad music. Bad music was already developed in the 2000s. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I'll tell you when it started. Real quick. This is one of the main things. Artists that are very smart were pre-selling out. They sell out to get the bag before they even step in front of that white man to do the dance. People always think, oh, listen, boy, you can really rap, boy. Let me see what you can do. And then they do a jig and all that kind of shit. Nah, they're like, this is how we're going to do it, though. We already know what to do. Whoop that trick. Whoop that trick. You know, when I saw that movie, right? I thought it was a comedy. I thought that shit was a comedy. I didn't know that they thought that was real music. To hit a simple basic whoop that trick, A, B, C, A, B, C, do, re, mi. That's a do. The song is do, re, mi. And they're making hits and everybody thinks it's a dope shit. I said, listen, it's just like reggaeton. And again, advanced. I said, that shit is just like reggaeton. But reggaeton was faster. Right. Because reggaeton was in the mid-90s and those kids didn't know how to sample. Sampling was hard then. You could only sample a little bit, right? You had to use DATs and you had to use that loop, right? Yeah. 8 seconds, shit like that. So what do? Well, we're allowed to party, right? La fiesta, coño, right? So let's just make party music, but with a rap style. And there you go. Boom. There goes the music. So a reggaeton song was what? 1 beat and 1 content, right? Hose, 1 beat. Hose, 1 beat. If you do the beat and you rap on it and say different things, like there go does, it's not reggaeton. Wow. So I saw that with everything that was going in the southern shit, right? And I was like, that's the blueprint. So by the time I start writing, I'm just writing about everything. I was like, it's a visible renaissance. This stuff is high quality. It may not be as good as the 90s, but it has as much as the 90s of a high level, right? And that's where that invisible renaissance came from. You know what I mean? Wow. And I say it real. There's a lot of guys that interview and they do good shows and they do all types of shit. But if you're an artist and I don't fucking know you, and you're media and I don't fucking know you, you bit the word though. You can't use the word. You know what I mean? Respectfully though. But it's all right though. It's all right though. I just want to do my Cuban link skit.
I got you on that. Let's get into the book, brother. Right. I mean, a lot of it, I am just taking it all in, man. You know, because it's just like I said, man. It's
the way I write honor. Is when I heard of Jizza is one of the most important writers in my life, though. Aside from like Amiri Baraka, Miguel Piñero, who wrote Short Eyes, and right. But as far as MCs, when Jizza said half short, twice strong, the way he could write like these 10 bars, but they're better than like the 20 bars. I was like, okay, concentrated language. You know, so I always want my work, especially my poetry, to be that juice that that your mom was making from the concentrate orange juice, and she's popping it out, and you have to hit it, and then the shit comes out. That's the shit that I was trying to write. You know what I mean? That you could hold it for a long time. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And the word would look beautiful. And when the first book I did was The Filtered Reel. And I just collected essays that really show what the last 2010s was. And then after that, I always did a reel of that year article, like the best of, but I called it the reel of. And when it became 2018, that year had too many records. That's when the flood of records, everybody started release 5, 6 albums. You know what I mean? And I had all of them. And I was like, yo, if I give you my favorite, then I didn't show you the world that I'm in. Right. If I gave you my favorite, then I'm just showing you what I like best of the world.
Right.
I want to show people the whole world, and I can't do that in an article. So I decided to make it a show. But I like to write, and it needs more of a documentation. And so I said, you know what, next year, maybe I'll do a book. And in 2020, I did it, Reel of 2020. And I did it as an ebook. And I was like, I don't know if people like it badly laid out. I just threw it as a PDF. And it sold really well. So I said, let me see if I make a whole book and put the 2021 and 2020 in it. And that one became more detailed. And I tried to break down MCs into brackets. You know what I mean? So if you're a 5%er, and I know it, I'm going to put you in that category, but you might also be included in lyricist categories, in producer categories, whatever the categories are, progressives. I separate the queens because I want people to know how many female MCs there are, and then overlap them, right? And instead of getting what I think is my favorite, because you'll tell what's my favorite. If I wrote 5,000 words about somebody, you know they're a favorite. If I wrote like a whole page about somebody and I wrote 15 words, it doesn't mean that I didn't like that. It meant that I liked that more. Okay. And it hit me more and I had more to say. So those books came out of that. I want to show you the whole world. That when I say Invisible Renaissance, that veil of all this junk music and sound slop that we hear is masking a wonderful universe here. And instead of going what I like, you could look through that and find what you like. And if you say, oh, Sunez, you missed the artist, there's 250 in there. If I didn't show you the world, though, then you could definitely venture into the world once I showed you that. Wow. Right? So, because you know you're going to miss things, you know?
Right.
Shit, I make a big database list of everything I get. And even when I finished the book, I was like, oh, shit, I color-coded that one wrong, and it wasn't in the book because I color-coded them after I wrote about them. But I was like, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going to do another edition. I'll just leave it like that because I'm on to 2022 already.
Jesus.
You know? I got to keep moving.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because there was some people like, oh, you didn't include me in the book and shit like that. And I'll be honest with them. Say, no, I didn't think that was that good. But I tell people why. You know what I'm saying? All that shit where people are like, yeah, I tell you your music sucks in front of your face, though. They do that in studios. And they don't walk around. But I used to be out there, and I used to be with people. Remember, because a lot of people don't know, right? The people that hurt you, the people that are big, the people that are menacing are the ones that don't rap well.
Wow.
And they're the ones that they come from the street, and they don't know how to rap, but they came and they did the street shit. But they're like, yo, you don't like how I rap? So you don't want me to do legal shit? Like, you don't want me to make a living right? You know? And I got to come with an explanation. Give you an explanation. If you want to take it from there, then we can take it from there. But the explanation is always good because you never know who's whack, who might actually learn. You know what I mean? Like the great Robert Johnson, blues guitars. You know, he was trash. Then he became a legend. You know what I mean? He put 7 strings on that guitar, came back as a legend. You know what I mean?
Wow, man.
So you never know. You know. So I always try to like give detail, even the stuff that I disagree about. If you notice at the end of the book, I wrote like who I'm not putting in this book. And some of it's pretty fiery. Like I'm not putting certain people in this book. Maybe they don't need me, or maybe because I don't think that what they're doing is that great. But I give you reasons. That's why I always tell people, I give you the earth, wind, and fire. I give you the reasons. You know what I mean? The reasons. You know, I give you all of that. So you got a reason why I'm not putting that in there. If you don't like it, well, that's what it is.
There's 2 things I want to ask, man, before we wrap up. One, how do you think the balance between knowledge itself and, I guess I want to say, hip hop, kind of like that world? Like, how do you think that
it's always been there at the root. There was one day I was teaching a class at a law school in Mecca, and casually in comes Kool Herc.
Wow.
And tells us all that we were the gods was the ones that was defending his speakers and they were the ones that had the b-boy stance and were standing by the speakers like this.
Yeah.
Because when we call it standing on your square.
Standing on your square.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that was the b-boys, because in our alphabet, T is truth or square. Mm-hmm. So when he said that, I was like, yeah, it's been right and exact. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But our language, the way that we phrase things, the way that we do things, was always a way to engage the youth. Mm-hmm. So it was always natural that we had those linguistics that appeal to the youth from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like the balance between Rastafarianism and reggae and roots reggae, that is very important within hip hop music, because we're the ones that are saying that it's not just a feel good mentality, that we're saying that the original man is God. It's an actual science that we're uncovering every day, and there's a whole language and detail that we speak that uncovers that. Wow. You know what I mean? Right. So it's still embedded in the music. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because all the brothers that I build with, though, if they're around me for 2 seconds, they know that I see them as the original man. And if I see them as the original man, I know they're the true and living God. Whether they have the knowledge of why exactly that is, or they come from the framework of me where we explain it through the supreme math and alphabet in that dialect and ethos, it doesn't matter to me. Wow. You know what I mean? Right?
Last question I want to ask you, brother. I usually have people give me a gem before they get out of here, right? But with you, being that your journey is so well respected throughout our peers and throughout the rappers, anyone, right. I want to know, what advice would you give someone who is trying to break ground into media? And I ask you that because you have carved your own lane for yourself, right? Books to prove it, right? You know, so I kind of want to know, like, what advice would you give someone who is trying to break into media?
I would say this, right? See this book here, Art and Art? That's a collection of poetry that I have embedded into pieces, over 120 plus pieces over the years, in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. But this is the peak of what I say when I say what I'm doing is an element of hip-hop. And when I look at people that do media, right, I try to tell them that, listen, always... You have to do something that other artists are doing in different ways. You have to be an athlete in this. You know what I mean? So you have to listen to music, and you have to learn how to articulate why certain sounds sound the way they are. You know what I mean? If you do hip hop writing about music and culture, to me, you have to be well versed in many genres. You have to hear all type of music. You know what I mean? All types of music, and be as best rounded as you can in all types of music. You know what I mean? Because that framework is going to give you the framework to really have a detail about hip-hop. Right. You also know the trends of commercialization, too. Right. They'll be very similar. You know what I mean? And if you could understand trends throughout genres, though, you'll understand what's going to be whack sooner than later. You know what I mean? But as far as advice, though, it's hard to tell if you have talent in things. You know what I'm saying? But when you write about things, you can always show the gift if you always go with detail. Remember, every single talent, right, is memorialized by the detail that it's able to expose. Whether we watch a sport, we watch Jordan fade away, it's the details that he is seeing in the fadeaway. Right. That little lean back, everything else, right?
The footwork.
When people read my writing, they're seeing that I can detail the actual song that they are listening to, and I understand MCing.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I understand it on a level that most people don't, you know, unless you MC. You know what I mean? So being able to get that detail across, focus on the details of the exercise as opposed to trying to expose talent, because you don't know what talents you have. Talents are exposed. They aren't just what you feel like them to be. You know? Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap, man. Good brother, Sunez Allah. I appreciate you, man. That shit was a lesson for me. So thank you, everything, man. I was just sitting back and soaking every little bit of that in, man. I appreciate you, brother.
That's peace.
You know what I mean? Your work is amazing. I think it speaks for itself. Please continue to drop books and give us game and give us gems You're important to the culture, man.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Nah, man. It means a lot for me, for you to be here sitting across from me, man. So I appreciate you, brother.
That's peace, man.
Right now. Yo, y'all kept them cameras off.